everybody, and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody, back again with Stephen, and let's start today with our top 5 new download locations. So for this week, we have Dalton, Georgia, Polokwane, South Africa, Greenville, North Carolina, Viroqua, Wisconsin, and London, England. So spanning the globe, which is always fun. Thank you all for listening, and we actually love hearing from people out there because sometimes it just feels like we're talking to ourselves, which is fun, but it's cool when you reach back. So if you could take a minute to email us. We have an email, goodstoriespodcast@gmail.com, and we promise to write back. But yeah, just say hi. Let us know where you're listening from and which episode you like the best. That actually helps us pick what comes up next. And if you do have suggestions for upcoming stories, I do keep a list, so feel free to contribute. But that's true for anybody out there listening. We like to hear from people. So goodstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Okay, moving on to today's story. Well, I take that back. First, I'll tell you what it was going to be. We've referred to the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, the trilogy, the Silmarillion, many times throughout our episodes so far. And I do think we should start in the trilogy soon.
Yes.
We thought about doing it today, but this story, also by Tolkien, came up first. This is a short story. It's called Smith of Wootton Major. So the Fellowship is coming, not quite yet. At first glance, this is a small and very simple tale. There's a village, and they love to cook. They love cooking there, so much so that they have a master cook and a special cake, and parties around the cake. So yes, Tolkien, JRR Tolkien, author of the broad, grand design of Middle-earth and Balrogs and the High King and rich histories and peoples and cultures, also wrote this small story about baking a cake. At least partly about baking a cake. But in his brilliant way, this story quietly opens a deeper world beneath the everyday ordinary, and it's told with tenderness, restraint, and just sweet affection for people doing ordinary people things. But those people can also carry extraordinary grace and appreciate great wonders. Tolkien gives us a vision of enchantment, not as an escape, but as a gift that enlarges a soul and demands some reverence, I think, in return. So, time for a story.
In the little village of Wootton Major, the town cook is a very important person. Once every 24 years, he is called upon to bake a special cake for the Feast of Good Children. With the help of his mysterious assistant, the master cook bakes a fairy cake, but includes in the mixture what he is told is a Fae star. When the smith's son unknowingly swallows it, he is granted access to the land of Faery. What follows is his life journey in that perilous land. He meets citizens of Faery, both great and small, and also learns deep secrets about some of his fellow villagers. Ultimately, he learns what must be done with the gift of the star, which he has so enjoyed for so long.
Very good. So, spoiler alert, we're going to go through it all the way, start to finish.
There's some twists at the end, so be prepared.
Some mystery. Yes, it's true. But this story came from Tolkien when he was asked to write the introduction to a publication of a George MacDonald story, The Golden Key, which is also wonderful. We haven't done that one yet, but it's great and we should.
We will, yes, because it is, as you said, great.
But he started that introduction. I don't know that anybody else could have done this, would have done this. The introduction starts, "Don't read this." Not yet. In capital letters. That's how he starts this introduction. And I don't know, did you have a chance to read through it?
Only very briefly. So Jody and I are reading out of 2 different versions of this. I am reading out of the collected Tales from the Perilous Realm, which is wonderful with some beautiful drawings, and it includes a number of these shorter works, but it only includes the works. There's no introduction, there's no extensive or anything. Jody has a much fancier version of this one that, frankly, I'm a little envious of, and I'm going to borrow after we do this podcast, because there are things I need to read and learn.
It's beautiful. I got it for Christmas as a gift from our EP. Thank you, David. Edited by Verlin Flieger and illustrated by Pauline Baines. So these names are familiar to me because of other podcasts and publications. So Pauline Baines, I know from Narnia. Mm-hmm. She, I believe, drew the initial illustrations for the Narnia series.
She did, but Tolkien loved her too and was involved in many of the works of both C.S. Lewis and JRR Tolkien.
She illustrated this. It's beautiful, the whole thing. And Verlin Flieger, this publication has maybe not everything about Smith of Wootton Major, but there's a lot. So it has a foreword by the editor here. It also has additional essays Tolkien wrote about the story. It has a timeline around this tiny story. Tolkien wrote a complete timeline, and then some letters and things as well, along with his notes. So there's different parts of the story where you can see what he blocked off and what he added in or changed the name of it. And his introduction starts, "Don't read this, not yet." And we've talked about this a little bit before. I think both Tolkien and Lewis wanted a story to stand on its own. And so the idea was that if you read this introduction, are you really letting the story stand on its own? So it bothered me a little bit because that's our platform here. That's what we do, is we kind of introduce and give some background. And his point is that if you're going to read The Golden Key, it would be like introducing George MacDonald and he's standing right next to you, but then you tell everything about him instead of speaking to him directly.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, except I feel like we're kind of a bridge.
That's what I hope we are. And to be fair, if people said, I'm going to turn off this podcast now and read Smith of Wootton Major, yes, please do.
Absolutely.
I would love it if that happened. But there are people who aren't going to read Smith of Wootton Major, or who are intimidated by it or aren't sure why it's worth reading to begin with. And that's what we hope to do. We hope to introduce people to the wonder of this in the hopes that they will go beyond us and go to the master who actually wrote it.
I stopped in the middle of reading it and said, I hope people read this. I hope they stop and go read it, because this one I actually learned of from you, because I didn't have it before Christmas in any kind of publication. And it's not in my version of On Fairy Stories, Leaf by Niggle, Farmer Giles of Ham. Those are all in there. Not this one. This one's different.
It is different. And I discovered this late too, which is probably appropriate because this was published late in the life of Tolkien. This was published in 1967 and he died, 1973, I want to say. And so this is considered to be his last major work that he published. And you can sense the depth of reading and study and writing he had done and just the love of Faery in this. And I found it kind of accidentally when I was going through a list of, well, have I read all Tolkien stuff? Now, obviously, it's impossible to read all of Tolkien stuff because of the voluminous notes he kept, that now it's possible to get access to some of those. But in terms of his published work, this was one that I had to go and find. And I am so glad I did, because it has just quickly gone up to near the top of my favorite things that he wrote.
So as I mentioned, Verlin Flieger puts a lot into this book. So I'm a little bit jumbled on what's where, but there's something in here where Tolkien is writing a letter, I think, to a friend, and describing this night where he went somewhere, maybe in Oxford, don't remember. And he described it as a rainy night. He had like a cold in his throat, but he went and he read this story. And then there's a comment on someone who was there listening to him read this story. And he didn't mention the throat cold. He mentioned how there were just people everywhere sitting on the floor just waiting to hear this story. Mm-hmm. I think it was new, so they didn't know what was coming, but just the delight that they experienced sitting there listening to JRR Tolkien reading this story. It's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. I would have loved to have been there.
There are some reviews that he got after the publication of this story, and some aren't very good and some are great, but it says this one, here's a quote, it says, perhaps the best evaluator of the story's elusive yet affecting quality was Roger Lansling Green, who noted on 3 December 1967 that to seek for the meaning of this story is to cut open the ball in search of its bounce. Tolkien treasured the comment and wrote Green to thank him.
Oh, that's great.
So I do think there is a possibility of overanalyzing the meaning behind it. You know, he classically wasn't a fan of allegory, but this one is just beautiful, and you can just read it and soak in it.
Oh, definitely. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I did do a little bit of online searching, looking for some essays and evaluations, and Honestly, I stopped because the ones I found just weren't useful. There were all these people trying to cram this into an allegorical interpretation, and it doesn't work. I do not think this is an allegory. So, whereas Leaf by Niggle, when we did, I do think that one's pretty allegorical. This one, I think, is a picture of Faery. I think this is a story that tries to tell something in words that can't be told in words. And that is such a challenging thing to do, but I think he pulls it off. I think you get truth out of this that can't be articulated really in any other way than through story. And that's a big part of the magic to it in my mind.
Well, and it began, as we said, he was hired to write an introduction to the Golden Key. What George MacDonald is great at is conveying things that you feel as opposed to the actual words, the actual message, but you feel something almost visceral when you read it. So as Tolkien wrote this introduction, he had the same thing. Instead, this story came out of it. As he was writing, kind of mid-thought, the introduction, this draft stops because he realized that he had a full-fledged idea of a story right there. And so he goes on to write this thing that is very much felt. It's very emotional in its nature as opposed to a literal, let's describe everything about this in words. Very much a felt story.
And how perfectly classic is that for Tolkien? I mean, what a genius and what a man. He had a task. He had a job to complete. But midway through decided he didn't want to do it, never actually finished it, and instead wrote this thing of unutterable beauty. I mean, that's so perfect for who the man was. And of course, like everything Tolkien wrote, the words are beautiful. He thought about words and loved words, and he writes with a charm in this that really just shows how much he improved over the course of his life. And I thought when he was young, he wrote well. Mm-hmm. But this one is so good. I mean, just listen to the way this starts. There was a village once, not very long ago for those with long memories, not very far away for those with long legs. Wootton Major it was called because it was larger than Wootton Minor, a few miles away deep in the trees. But it was not very large, though it was at that time prosperous, and a fair number of folk lived in it, good, bad, and mixed, as is usual.
It's such a comfortable way of reading. I've read some more recent publications lately, not of Tolkien, just writing now versus then. The feel of it is so different because it's like he's chatting with us. He's relaying a story almost in front of a fireplace. We're sitting in armchairs, as is usual. These little asides that they're not too coy. They're just charming.
Mm-hmm. And it brings you into it immediately. I mean, Wootton Major is kind of a weird name, but now we know why it's called that almost immediately. And it sets the tone that this isn't meant to be a faraway thing. This isn't, once upon a time, long, long ago. It's not too far away. It's not that long ago. But it is a unique village in its own right, with people of all sorts of crafts who are well known. But it turns out the craft that is most well known about this village is cookery.
JRR Tolkien bakes a cake. When you told me that before I'd read it, I couldn't believe it. It's about a baker?
Well, when I started reading it, I couldn't believe it. Like, we're talking about a cake. Yeah, we are talking about a cook. But not just any cook. He is a master cook. Because in this village, the master cook is a person of some importance. Because there are many festivals. We're going to focus on one. But there are many festivals, and it's the cook's job to provide food for this. And it's almost Shire-like. The idea that the food expected is ample. There's supposed to be a lot of it. But the cook is such an important character. But really what makes him important is a single feast and a single feast out of that feast. One of the biggest festivals of the year is the only one in winter is the Feast of Good Children. And his description of this is great, and I'm resisting the urge to just read this story because his words are better than mine. But of the Feast of Good Children, once every 24 years is a special Feast of 24, where 24 good children are gathered together, and the cook bakes a cake.
I love how it's described, how the kids are picked. Sometimes they get the right ones, the best kids in the village, and sometimes some are missed, as is usual.
As is usual, Earth isn't perfect.
The cook's house and the kitchen adjoin the Great Hall, the largest and oldest building in the place and the most beautiful, built of good stone and good oak. But here there is a use of once upon a time, which I noted just because it's so classic. It was built of good stone and good oak and was well tended, though it was no longer painted or gilded as it had been once upon a time.
Yeah.
So in the trilogy, which we will talk about, they use of old. I think that's his version here for little kids. A kid's story, but not just for kids, but once upon a time. Of old.
Of old. Once upon a time. Well, I think we should go back to the description of the master cook and this great feast. It says, for that occasion, the master cook was expected to do his best. And in addition to many other good things, it was custom for him to make the great cake. That's capitalized, great cake. By the excellence, or otherwise, of this, his name was chiefly remembered, for a master cook seldom, if ever, lasted long enough in office to make a second great cake. So there we have it. The great cake is really the item on which this entire story is going to hinge.
So like I said, there's a lot in my book. I don't think that's in yours, brother. Tolkien, in his way that he does, made a timeline of this story. Have you seen the timeline?
I haven't, but I can do it in my head because you really need to know the timeline to fully understand the progression of the cakes.
It's true, but you get it wrong. I'm confident.
Okay.
Because his timeline, the author's timeline, starts well before this story.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't know that.
He goes back and back and back, and then it goes past the end of this story as well. He bookends this whole story inside of its own context. He had more story. He put a world to it because that's what Tolkien did. But here, we learn about this one master cook. To everyone's surprise, since it had never happened before, the master cook suddenly announced that he needed a holiday, and he went away. This would be shocking in a small village, especially when every 24 years you got to make a great cake.
Yeah, holidays don't seem to be a thing, and certainly traveling doesn't seem to be a thing. But what's even more shocking is he comes back. And when he comes back, he has brought with him an apprentice. It says that that's not really the unusual part, having an apprentice, that it was expected that the master cook was going to have an apprentice, and the apprentice would take over when the master cook either retired or died. But the fact that he brought a foreigner, somebody from outside the village, that was unheard of. And so they all just call him Prentice, shortened apprentice. He's the Prentice. But he has a name, and he goes by the name of Alf.
So yes, very shocking, I know. But it does say that the master cook before he'd been very taciturn. But when he came back, he seemed merrier. He'd sing songs. He seemed more joyful. But he comes back with this outsider. Most people don't get to know his apprentice. He's an out-of-towner. But it turns out the master cook had tried to find somebody local, or at least somebody had offered, a man named Noakes. Mm-hmm. He'd wanted the job, and he just didn't do a good job.
Yeah, he didn't. The master cook would not accept him as his apprentice. He would help him sometimes, but he just was not the right guy for the job. But Noakes disagreed. Noakes thought he was definitely the right guy for the job and always wanted to be the master cook.
So as the master cook is there, he's already gone off and come back, which is shocking for a man of his position. But it says the next surprise came only 3 years later. One spring morning, the master cook took off his tall white hat, folded up his clean aprons, hung up his white coat, took a stout ash stick and a small bag, and departed. Didn't tell anybody else except his apprentice. And I love what he says, though. He says, "Goodbye for now. I expect it will turn out all right. If we meet again, I hope to hear all about it."
Yeah, right.
And he never returns. This long-standing tradition of the master cook who finds a local apprentice and they do this thing every 24 years. This master cook says no, and he leaves.
He has an apprentice. The village, though, doesn't even think about making him the master cook once the master leaves because he's a foreigner. He's only been there for 3 years. He looks so young. It's never a consideration. And so this is Noakes's time to shine. And I love the logic behind it. They say that, poor cookery is better than no cookery. And so they're willing to take him. And I think he has like 7 years until the next great cake. And so they figure, all right, 7 years, that's enough time for him to come up with something passable. And we got to have somebody. So Noakes steps into the role of the master cook, but Prentice is still around. Alf remains as his assistant, but Noakes doesn't treat him great.
No, and he's got ego, and you can tell from the beginning. He Noakes is very pleased how this all turned out. He always knew he'd do a great job at this. And he'd put on the tall white hat and look at his reflection in a polished frying pan. I mean, the ego there.
And the line, he would respond to this, "How do you do, master? That hat suits you properly. Might have been made for you. I hope things go well with you."
And so Noakes tries. He does all right. He learns a lot from Prentice over time. It says Prentice mostly does all the work, but 7 years goes by pretty quick. And now he has to make this great cake. This is a big expectation, and it has to be something exemplary. You can't just copy what somebody did before even. It has to be new and exciting.
Yeah, and he's nervous because he is not up to this. He doesn't know how to do this, but he starts doing some research, probably way later than he should have, but he starts reading books. He starts reading the old cookbooks, and he can't read them all, but some of them he can, and they're talking about spices and ingredients that he's never heard of before, and so he's panicking a little bit, but he does have, in general, an idea of what this cake should be. It says his chief notion was that it should be very sweet and rich, and he decided that it should be entirely covered in sugar icing, at which Prentice had a clever hand. That will make it pretty and fairy-like, he thought. Fairies and sweets were two of the very few notions he had about the tastes of children. Fairies he thought one grew out of, but of sweets he remained very fond. So now he has a plan. He's got an idea. Okay, it's a cake for kids. We're going to go fairy, which means sweet.
Sweet and glittery. And a fairy queen dressed all in white with a little wand in her hand, ending in a tinsel star. Classic, yes?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, very fairyish.
So I did read some of Tolkien's notes on this story, and he says that Noakes is pretty unlikable in general. He's supposed to be. He's supposed to be the guy who doesn't get it. He thinks fairies are, little creatures with a star on the end of a wand. I mean, I feel like Tolkien would find that idea offensive himself.
He does.
He does. There's a whole essay about it. But he says in that note that Noakes' redeeming quality is that he does seem to kind of like kids.
Yeah.
He's not an evil man. He's trying to do something he thinks will make the children happy.
Yeah, he always strikes me more of as ignorant and vain than evil. I agree. He's not a villain in this, but he's also somebody who definitely doesn't quite get it, and he is certainly pompous and full of himself.
Well, that's what I mean about a sweet tale. There's not really a villain. If it's anybody, it's Noakes.
Yeah, and again, he is decidedly not. So you are totally right on that.
But he's looking at some of these old spices, and like you said, he can't even read the names of them, but he remembers a box. The master cook before him had a box, and he goes to find it and says he's never even looked at it since the master cook left and he took over. But he takes it down, he blows the dust off the lid. All the spices in it are dry and musty and no good at all. But in one compartment in the corner, he discovered a small star. Hardly as big as one of our sixpences, black-looking, as if it was made of silver, but was tarnished. And he says, "That's funny," and he holds it up to the light. And Prentice is behind him. He says, "No, it isn't." Makes him jump.
Yeah, Prentice feels strongly about this. It is not funny. Now, the master cook is not used to being addressed this way by someone he deems his social inferior. And so he gets a little upset about it and says, what do you mean? If it isn't funny, what is it? And here we get the line from Prentice. It is Fae. F-A-Y. It is Fae, said Prentice. It comes from fairy. Now, up to this point, when Noakes is talking about children liking fairies and about the idea of things that are fairy-like, he spells it the way I would spell fairy. F-A-I-R-Y, F-A-I-R-E-S, traditional fairy spelling as far as I know. But here, when Prentice says it is Fae and comes from fairy, the spelling changes. And it's Faery. This is a clue to us that this is an entirely different thing. This is not Noakes's idea of sweet and pretty and silly and funny. This is something with so much more weight and meaning to it. But Noakes just doesn't get it.
No, he laughs at Prentice. He's like, you'll grow up someday. He laughs down at Prentice. And Prentice asks, what are you going to do with it then? Put it into the cake, of course. Just the thing, especially if it's fairy, Fairy. He says, I dare say you've been to children's parties. They used to put things in cakes, right? Like coins and trinkets and things. Perfect for that. We'll put this in there.
Yeah. Prentice warns him, though. He said, but this isn't a trinket, master. It's a Fae star. But the cook, he's on board and he's going to do this. And he says he'll tell the children about it. It'll make them laugh. And Prentice responds as, I don't think it will, master, but it is the right thing to do. Quite right. So Prentice wants this to go into the cake. It wants to be a part of it. But his reasoning for it and his approach to it is very different from Noakes.
But Prentice is allowed, given the job of making the fairy queen. And Prentice says, I'll do it if you were too busy, but it was your idea and not mine. And Prentice makes this, what is offensive to Tolkien, beautiful little fairy queen. She's a small, diminutive little person with this beautiful star on the end of her wand. And the cake turns out quite good, actually, and it has 24 red candles, tons of icing sugar, very sweet, very rich, just what Noakes wanted.
It's pretty clear that it turns out well because Alf essentially makes the whole thing. Noakes has very little role in this, but it is a wonderful cake, and it is a great cake. This is where I did start to like Noakes a little bit. This idea of the way he interacts with the children, I think is very sweet. So he's standing there ready to cut the cake, and Alf is there ready to sharpen the knife with which he's going to cut the cake. And the cook's lines here are really very sweet. I should tell you, my dears, he said, that inside this lovely icing there is a cake made of many nice things to eat. But also stirred well in there are many pretty little things, trinkets and little coins and whatnot, and I'm told that it is lucky to find one in your slice. There are 24 in the cake, so there should be one for each of you if the fairy queen plays fair. But she doesn't always do so. She's a tricky little creature. You ask Mr. Prentice. But he doesn't stop there, because those were the 24 trinkets and coins that he had planned to put in. But then he says, no, I'm forgetting, said the cook. There's 25 this evening. There's also a little silver star, a special magic one, or so Mr. Prentice says. So be careful. If you break one of your pretty front teeth on it, the magic star won't mend it. But I expect it's a specially lucky thing to find, all the same.
So some kids find many coins, some find none. It says that's how the luck rolls sometimes. But when the cake was all eaten, there was no sign of any magic star. And the cook thinks, wow, it must have melted.
Can't have been made of silver. But it was a Fae star. It says the apprentice was not one to make mistakes about things of that sort. What had happened was that one of the boys at the feast had swallowed it without ever noticing it. This boy is very sweet. He had also found a coin in his cake, but he gave it to the little girl next to him because she was disappointed because she didn't have anything. So this little boy walked out of there thinking he hadn't gotten anything from the cake because he gave away the one thing he found. So immediately there's something kind of winning and charming about this little boy who had consumed the Fae star.
Well, this is the feast of good children.
That's right.
It says that he sometimes wonders about it, and he didn't know that it had remained with him, tucked away in some place where it could not be felt, for that was what it was intended to do. There it waited for a long time until its day came. That's very leading. I love it. So this feast, the big feast, the Feast of the Good Children, is always in midwinter. Mm-hmm. Now it's June, and this boy, we don't know his name quite yet, but it's his birthday. He's turning 10, and he's looking out the window, and it's just beautiful. And it says, a little breeze, cool and fragrant, stirred the waking trees. And then the dawn comes, and he starts to sing, and he thinks, it reminds me of Faery. But in Faery, the people sing too. And here, as he sings, the song leaps out of his mouth and he catches it.
He's holding the star in his hand. It was bright silver now, glistening in the sunlight, but it quivered and rose a little as if it was about to fly away. Without thinking, he clapped his hand to his head, and there the star stayed in the middle of his forehead, and he wore it for many years. This Fae star, this magic fairy star, is now on his brow. And I love, we're going to see over and over when he's talking to the people of Fairyland that they call him Starbrow, which is beautiful and just wonderful. It says, too, this star is not invisible even in our world. His family can see it. Children can see it. Sometimes it's brighter, sometimes it's duller. But he is now marked in some way by this Fae star. But people like Noakes, they never see it. And since most of the village is more like Noakes than anything else, most people don't ever see this star that is forever imprinted on his forehead as he goes about his life.
I love that it came to him when he was singing. But it says that it actually adds to his song. His song and even his speaking voice become more beautiful as he grows up. It says people like to hear him speak, even if it was no more than a good morning. There's something about him changed by the presence of this star on his brow. Even when people can't see it, don't know it's there. And here's where we learn his name. This boy who becomes a man, he became well known in his country, not only in his own village, but in many others round about for his good workmanship. His father was a smith, and he followed him in his craft and bettered it. So he was Smith's son, and then he becomes Smith. Mm-hmm. And it describes the things that he makes. He's a smith. A lot of them are very practical. Bars and bolts and hinges, pot hooks, fire dogs and horseshoes. But it says even those have a grace about them. But the things he's really good at making are delightful and beautiful, and they're toys. Toys and just charming things. I love that gate work and leaves and all that. Mm-hmm. He makes them out of iron, and they have both strength and beauty. You know, it's not just this frivolous thing. It's not just icing sugar on the cake. It says these gates, you cannot pass them once they're closed. They are both strong and beautiful. But people look at this ironwork, these vines along these gates, and it's just gorgeous.
Yeah. And when he's doing this decorative art, he sings. When he's doing stuff of beauty, he sings. And it says he sang when he was making things of this sort. And when Smith began to sing, those nearby stopped their own work and came to the smithy to listen. We learn some other things about his life. We learn that he grows up and gets married as the master smith. He marries the little girl he gave the silver coin to. I think that's so sweet. And he has a son and a daughter, and they're a happy family. And again, they can see the star on his forehead. He becomes very successful. He is a master smith, and we've talked about the greatness of these things he makes. That would be enough. If that was all he did in his life, that would be more than enough. That would be incredible. But there's more to it, because he became acquainted with Faery, Faery.
And some regions of it he knew as well as any mortal can. And it says he goes off on these adventures, sometimes walking, sometimes riding, and other people around just assume he's on business. But his family knows he goes to Faery. Mm-hmm. He goes and explores.
I do think it's important, as we've already pointed out, that he is good at his business. He is indeed a master smith. I love this line because it's so folksy. He knew how to turn an honest penny into 2p. That's a great line in terms of just him being very practical. But yeah, his journeys into Faery are really what become, in many ways, the defining aspect of his life. And it seems that this star somehow is a passport into it, is a guide into it. It says he was welcome there, for the star shone bright on his brow, and he was as safe as a mortal can be in that perilous country. The lesser evils avoided the star, and from the greater evils he was guarded. So we have this gift that he received without asking, without knowing. And then this gift leads him to go into these journeys. But even on the journeys, this gift increases. The idea that he's protected by this thing that he never searched for, and that he can journey in this perilous land as safe as any mortal can be. Now, again, that doesn't say he's totally safe, and we'll see that he's not, but is a beautiful, beautiful introduction.
Well, it describes that he could have made weapons. He's a smith. but that he's wise enough to know as he journeys through Faery that those weapons wouldn't have done any good. The dangers are different. And he doesn't typically have a guide in Faery. It describes how he changes his path as he learns more about it.
When he enters in, first he's speaking to sort of the lesser citizens of Faery, right? Bunnies and rabbits and what have you. It says he'll spend entire days looking at a flower or a tree. But as he becomes bolder, as he becomes more familiar to it, he starts to truly journey more. And his goals sort of shift and change over time as he's journeying through this land. His first goal is to try to find the end of it. He thinks, well, I'm here. I can come in. I'm going to find the end of Fairyland. And he journeys and journeys and journeys until he finds, and again, the words of Tolkien are just beautiful, the sea of windless storm. He gets to a beach with a sea over the top of it. But what he finds there is fairy in the sense that Tolkien talks about fairy.
The blue waves like snow-clad hills rolled silently out of unlight to the long strand, bearing white ships that return from battles on the dark marches of which men know nothing. He describes these elven mariners on these big, dark ships, and he's terrified. He's just a man and noticing these things that he knows he doesn't understand. They have piercing light in their eyes. It says his heart was shaken with fear, and he fell on his face. And they passed over him and went away into the echoing hills.
These are warriors of Faery. These are mariners. These are sailors. And this is no place for him. This is not a place where he can be safe, comfortable, happy. So he is stunned by it and is beautiful and striking. But this is not a place he is ever going to go back to. But this also makes him think, oh, this must be an island. This is where he starts to think it must be an island, so his goal changes. He thinks, I can't really get to the end of it like I thought I could, so I'm going to now take a turn to the mountains. And so now his journeys are to the outer mountains. And again, it's described in just a few pages. We get adventure after adventure in Fairyland. And each one could be a full story in his own right. And I'm sure Tolkien had some of those in his mind. But the next one, through the outer mountains, he ends up finding a tree. And not just any tree, he finds the king's tree, springing up, tower upon tower into the sky, and its light was like the sun at noon, and it bore at once leaves and flowers and fruits uncounted, and not one was the same as any other that grew on that tree. The following line is great. It says, he never saw that tree again. He looked for it, he asked about it, but he never saw it again.
It's interesting, though, because he doesn't have a guide specifically at this time when he's going through Faery, except that he's often blinded by mists. He was overtaken by a gray mist, and then he's given this one-time vision of the king's tree. And I think it's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
He's not allowed to approach it, and clearly he's something special. To be given this star in the first place, there were 24 children at that feast. He was picked to get this star. He was selected, I think in large part because he can appreciate it. Tolkien, of anyone, would know that not everyone can appreciate fairy, the idea of fairyland and what that means. So actually, would you talk about that a little bit? Because your memory is better than mine. What would Tolkien mean by fairy? I know it's a very long answer and he wrote a lot on it. That perilous country.
I don't think he would be able to give a swift definition in the same way that I can't. I think my answer to what does Tolkien mean by fairy is to say, read Smith of Wootton Major. I think this book is his answer to that question. And I don't think it can be told in fewer words. Because fairy's a place, but it's also not a place. It's a people, the Fae, but it's also not a people. It's a way of thinking. It's a atmosphere. It's an aroma. It is something beyond our day-to-day reality. It is good, but it is also evil. There are lesser and greater evils in this. It is something that can be delightful, but something that can be terrifying and tormenting. And so it's a world of its own, that both exists and doesn't exist. It's a land of contradiction in so many ways. And again, I don't think I can define it. And I think this book is Tolkien's shortest way he possibly could of trying to define it.
I think displaying a glimpse of it for sure. This is Smith's glimpse of it, and he's given a vision of this tree, but no more than that for the tree. Interesting, the greater and lesser evils. I hadn't really put that together with the Wootton Major and Wootton Minor. It's the very ordinary. One's bigger, one's lesser. But here, it's so much grander and simpler. It describes how Smith sometimes at the beginning would look at one flower. He'd go to Faery and look at one flower the whole time and come back stunned.
Yeah.
Unable to even repeat what he'd experienced beyond words.
But he was able to bring, not that he brought the flower back from those experiences, but what he brought back changed him. And it changed what he could do in the world of men. So this artwork he's doing, these both gorgeous and functional devices and tools that he's constructing, that is also a gift of Faery. He couldn't do that without these other journeys or these other trips. He could have been a good smith, but it wouldn't be the same. There'd be something lacking, something less. And so we have the intrusion of Faery into the real world through Smith of Wootton Major. But we also have the intrusion of the real world into Faery through Smith of Wootton Major, which takes us to the next passage. So far, everything in Fairyland has been beautiful and stunning. I mean, he was scared by the soldiers, but he never really seemed in danger.
Wait. I want to read this, then you can move on. It says, he, Smith, had seen things of both beauty and terror that he could not clearly remember, nor report to his friends, though he knew that they dwelt deep in his heart. But some things he did not forget, and they remained in his mind as wonders and mysteries that he often recalled. So he either has the actual experience and memory of it, or this essence, this feeling of it that's conveyed.
Yeah, there's still a part of him, even if he can't remember it, even if he can't put it into words. The next journey, though, takes him to a beautiful lake, and this scene is painted so well and is just stunning. Because he looks at what he thinks is beautiful water, a clear lake, but then he looks under it and he sees what seems to be beings of fire, these flames twisting and moving and turning in the lake. Now, I don't know about you, but if I saw a land with beings of fire and flames turning and twisting, I would think that's not a place where Stephen can safely be. I don't know that I want to get closer, but Smith has grown bold. And Smith goes to the lake and he puts his foot on the water and he's shocked to find that it's solid, that he could actually support him. And so he goes out on this solid water to try and find and see and become closer to this marvel he's witnessing. And this is where things go wrong because the wind picks up. The wind turns into this howling rage, which blows him off the lake, which blows him over the hills and the mountainsides, until he grasps the slender trunk of a tree. This is a birch tree. And he grabs it, and the tree bends to the ground around him, and the wind blows all the leaves off the tree, but the branches of the birch close around him until the wind passes, and it saves him. He's able to stay there on the tree. But we see here that he has done harm to the tree. Because after the wind passes, it is stripped bare. It is naked. It has given of itself in order to save him. And this wounds him. He feels so guilty. He puts his hand on it and he talks about, "Blessed be the birch. What can I do to make amends or give thanks?" He felt the answer of the tree pass up from his hand. "Nothing," it said. "Go away. The wind is hunting you. You do not belong here. Go away and never return." He's overstepped himself. He's gone a place where he shouldn't go. And even though he was protected and comes away from it, he has caused harm. And so there are perils here, and there is weight here, and there are consequences here based off of his decisions.
I think after that, he doesn't go back to Faery for a while. He is grieved and probably scared. But at the back of my book, there is an entry where Tolkien wrote it differently initially. before it was changed.
Oh, I'm fascinated.
The lake has a name. The Lake of Tears. It says one day he came, some of it's crossed out. So this is him editing his own things. One day he came to a lake which he had heard called, and he says, no, I crossed that out. The Lake of Tears, although he did not know its name. He tasted the water, and it was bitter, and his heart was saddened as he walked in the forest. I think this is why he's grieved, the birch is grieved. But at the end, this changed the whole rest of how I read this story for me. This is not what's in the published version. This is Tolkien's notes. The birch tells him when he says, blessed be the birch, what can I do to show my thanks? She tells him nothing. The wild wind is hunting you. If you see the king, tell him. Only he can still the wind once it's aroused. Mm-hmm. I just love looking at these notes he wrote. This is him just working through it, but it had a name, the Lake of Tears. Mm-hmm. Interesting that he took that out. That is not in this final version.
No, not at all.
And yet, he walks away grieved. The birch is grieved. And he walks away with fear at this one. It's just beautiful telling of multiple things. But here, in the preliminary version, is where we learn a little bit about the king. There was a fairy queen on the cake, right? With the star, and Prentice did not like that. But here, there's something about the king, and that the king has power inside of Faery. So far, we've only seen his tree, the king's tree springing up, and it was this beautiful thing. But here, there'd be reference to a king who has power inside of his domain, his dominion. I like it.
Yeah, no, I love that too. That's very cool. And it's fascinating to think about just the creation process of this. What things he kept in, what he chose to remove, and why. So fun. So, what he left in is stunning and beautiful. So,
oh, yeah.
But that is interesting to add that wrinkle to it, that little change.
Oh, so he doesn't go back to Faery again for a while, it says, but he could not forsake it. And when he returned, his desire was still stronger to go deep into the land. And it describes how he finds a road through the outer mountains, and he goes on till he comes to the inner mountains.
And can I read this? Because this sentence sticks with me. Yet in the end he found a pass that he could scale, and upon a day of days greatly daring, he came through a narrow cleft and looked down, though he did not know it, into the Vale of Evermorn. Several things about that I want to talk about. One, the Vale of Evermorn, ever morning, right? The morning, that's a beautiful name for any place, and we'll see here it really deserves its name. But the other is just listen to the poetry of that. And upon a day of days greatly daring, he came through a narrow cleft and looked down. What do you hear? You hear that duh sound. Duh, 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 duh. This is the alliteration of Anglo-Saxon poetry. This is the poetry that was in his soul that just comes out in this sentence in the middle of this prose work. And I think there's a beauty to it that really, again, it has stayed with me. And so this line, and then that whole concept, upon a day of days. It's a day, but it's a day of days.
Well, it's like the star. The star was waiting until its time came.
Yeah.
There's a timing to things. There's a chronology.
But even more than that, the idea of permanence and newness. The idea that things cycle, but that there are times within the cycle where something happens. I'm thinking here of the feasts, and I'm thinking here of the Feasts of Good Children. There's a Feast of Good Children every year, but in that year of years, every 24 years, there's the Great Cake. And so again, it's this idea of both fluidity and station, right? Of permanence and movement and change. And I just think it's a beautiful line.
Well, and the alliterative, we just did Sir Gawain, right? That's what it is, that alliterative poetry where it builds on itself with the sounds.
So within this Vale of Evermorn, he journeys. And it's such a new thing for him. It says, in this land where the green surpasses the green of the meads of outer Faery as they surpass ours in our springtime. He is now in the inner Faery. He has moved into a place where he has never been before. It talks about how the air is so lucid that you can see the tongues of the birds that are singing. But there's not just birds and grass here. he comes across elven singers. He comes across fairies and maidens who are dancing.
The speed and the grace and the ever-changing modes of their movements enchanted him, and he stepped forward towards their ring. Then suddenly they stood still, and a young maiden with flowing hair and kilted skirt came out to meet him. And she laughs at him. She says, "You are becoming bold, Starbrow, are you not?" She knows his name. "Have you no fear what the queen might say if she knew of this? Unless you have her leave." And he's embarrassed. It says that, for he became aware of his own thought and knew that she read it, that the star on his forehead was a passport to go wherever he wished. And now he knew that it was not.
How great is that concept? This star is not a free pass. Yes, it's an interest into Faery. Yes, it grants you some protection. It grants you some right. But it does not grant... You are not the king of Faery. You do not have freedom to go where you will, do what you want without reprisal, without consequence. And so many of us, I think, when we enter into something, particularly into Faery, this dangerous place, there's this idea of, oh, I'm good here. I can look wherever I want. How many times have people been drawn into dark corners of fantasy of various kinds? Things that aren't good for them, that aren't made for them, that end up poisoning them in some way, or indeed, some cases, destroying them. And so access to Faery, again, doesn't mean it's all good, doesn't mean you can enjoy it all because you enjoy parts of it. Those who protect you have granted there are things you may see and things that you really should not. And I think there's so much wisdom in that. And something that I think most of us don't think about. I think we tend to think about it as a binary thing. We're either in or we're out, right? We're either all Faery or not. But no, there are parts of it that a mortal can endure and parts of it that they cannot. And this is all under the control of the queen and the king.
Well, and Smith couldn't have made it to the inner ring at the beginning. Presumably, he's journeyed and learned and grown wiser from where he began. It's a lot like a child. You know, there are things that as children grow and become stronger and more aware, they can carry, and there's things that they shouldn't. It's true for us as well, and it's true for Smith here in Faery.
There's one other thing I do want to mention real quick, because this is really where we first hear him called Starbrow. And I just love that name. I love the idea of a star upon the forehead. But any reader of Tolkien has to think of, and I'm going to pronounce it two ways because I've heard of both, Earendil or Earendil, the mariner of song, who has the Silmaril upon his brow, who is this great messenger from the children of Iluvatar to Valinor, the one who is able to journey into the West and to save the world. So again, we have this connection. We have this star-browed character who can move between different worlds, between different realities. And I just get excited anytime I think of Earendil. So this made me think of him and it made me happy.
There's so many notes in Tolkien's essay on this brother that you're going to enjoy reading. I wish I could pull more of them out for you. Clearly, he thought about the name, and he actually simplified it. So here it is just Starbrow. But I love this line. It says, "The love of Faery is the love of love, a relationship towards all things, animate and inanimate, which includes love and respect, and removes or modifies the spirit of possession and domination." He is Starbrow, but it was given to him. He didn't take it. He didn't earn it. It was a gift, freely given. And here he is allowed, permitted to dance for a little while with these elven maidens. It says there they danced together, and for a while he knew what it was to have the swiftness and the power and the joy to accompany her. For a while.
Mm-hmm. She says, though, "Farewell now. Maybe we shall meet again by the queen's leave." And then he goes home. It says he remembered nothing about that journey. But one thing that I forgot to mention as part of this dance is this maiden puts a flower in his hair. Mm-hmm. It says he doesn't remember how he got home, but he did. And when he got home, his daughter comments, "Where have you been? Your star is shining bright." And his son, who sees him, sees this shadow of him and he says, "Dad, you're a giant. He seems so bright and so huge and so big." And then his wife says, "What's that in your hair?" and sees the flower. And so the flower is brought from Faery into the world. And oh, what a special flower it is.
The flower did not wither nor grow dim, and they kept it as a secret and a treasure. He's a smith. He makes it a box, a casket with a key for it. And there it lay and was handed down for many generations in his kin. They call it the living flower, capitalized.
And those who inherited the key would at times open the casket and look long at the living flower, till the casket closed again. The time of its shutting was not theirs to choose. I wonder about that phrase. I love it. I don't really know what it means, but it does seem to be within this theme that if you're going to experience Faery, if you're going to experience this, you do have to give up control. It's not yours. You don't own it. They don't own this flower. They don't even own the light of the flower or the choice of when it's to be displayed. And there is something very poignant about that. And I think in keeping with what we just talked about, the concept of gift, the concept of giving up ownership, but in doing so, you get to experience.
You mentioned early on that Tolkien wrote this later in life. There's a lot towards the end of this story that feels like a goodbye. And here, I don't think it's an accident that he comes away with this living flower, but it's his kids who see him first. It's his kids who comment. And it talks about the generations who inherit this flower. This story isn't just about Smith. At the beginning, he wasn't even in it. We had a master cook and an apprentice and another one. This one is very generational and about the passing of things, but the value of the things while you're in them as well. So this flower passes from one to the next, just like the master cook to the apprentice. It is that chronology, that timeline. And here he has it with this beautiful gift of a flower from this elven maiden.
Mm-hmm. And you're totally right about time because it does continue to pass. Noakes has retired and Alf is now the master cook of the village. And there's another great cake. So there's another great cake that happens, and it's wonderful because Alf is wonderful. But then time continues to go on, and things keep going until eventually Smith is actually given a summons from Fairyland. He is given a summons from the Queen, and he goes on the longest journey I think he has yet done. He doesn't really know where he's going. Those mists come over his eyes, but in this one he is guided until eventually he is able to reach the living heart of Faery, where he is summoned before the Queen.
There he was brought before the Queen herself. She wore no crown and had no throne. She stood there in her majesty and her glory, and all about her was a great host shimmering and glittering like the stars above. But she was taller than the points of their great spears, and upon her head there burned a white flame. He gets to approach the Queen of Faery.
I love this. As he stood before her, and he did not kneel in courtesy, for he was dismayed and felt that for one so lowly, all gestures were in vain. He is so overawed in the presence of the Queen that even acts of submission and subservience seem to be a mockery. He's not even worth in his mind that. I mean, it would be like dirt bowing to somebody walking over it. He doesn't feel he's at this level, and he is just dumbstruck by what he is experiencing.
And it says, in that moment he knew her again, the fair maid of the green veil, the dancer at whose feet the flower sprang, the girl who gave him the flower to take back to his ordinary life. The Queen, she had mentioned by the Queen's leave they might meet again. Here is that moment.
Mm-hmm. She has given leave. It says, she smiled, seeing his memory, and drew towards him, and they spoke long together, for the most part without words. It says he learns many things from her, and then he remembers back to the children's feast, and he remembers that silly little sugar fairy queen with the wand, and he is ashamed because that trinket, that toy, compared to the living reality of what he is seeing, it just embarrasses him.
But she laughs, and she says, do not be grieved for me, Starbrow, nor too much ashamed of your own folk. Better a little dull, maybe, than no memory of Faery at all. For some, the only glimpse. For some, the awaking. Ever since that day, you've desired in your heart to see me, and I have granted your wish. But I can give you no more. Now at farewell, I will make you my messenger. If you meet the king, say to him, the time has come. Let him choose.
And following that, she says, now kneel of your courtesy. What the queen is doing here is such a generous act of royalty. This is condescension at its finest, but condescension in the old meaning of the term. When we talk about condescension, it's very belittling. It's very, I'm up here and you're down there. But in Middle English and Older English, in the old tales, when they talk about condescension, what they're talking about is the greater coming down to the level of the lower, and in that way giving it respect and honor and bringing up, sharing some of its greatness. And so the queen here is condescending. I'm taken, as I often am, to the words of Lady Julian of Norwich, who is my favorite 14th century mystic.
I've heard that.
Yeah. No, but she talks about how the greatest gift a king could give to his people is spending time with them and acknowledging them for what they are. And she's writing this in a time when kingship and lordship and nobility is a very big thing. And she, of course, refers to this to what Christ did for us when Christ came down and joined his people. The king condescended to be one of us. And so there are echoes of this condescension of this great queen to this man. And she even bids him kneel. And we said he didn't think he was worthy of that. And so this isn't her belittling him. This is her granting him the dignity of serving her. And there is something beautiful and poignant and glorious about that.
It's true if something truly is greater, because then in humility, you know yourself lesser, and that he has been elevated by her attentions toward him. And this book, again, it's really short, and we're taking a long time for how short it is, but there's these echoes in it because Tolkien's just brilliant of this lesser, greater and lesser. Wootton major, Wootton minor. Here it's the queen and Smith, but it's also Faery and ordinary time. Not that one doesn't have value because it's lesser, but there is a difference between them. But they can also be connected. And it says here that as he knelt, she stoops and laid her hand on his head, and a great stillness comes upon him. He seemed to be both in the world and in Faery, and also outside them and surveying them, so that he was at once, I think this is very important, a key statement in this book. He was all at once, all these things, in bereavement and in ownership and in peace. That's a lot for one man to feel at one time.
Yeah.
But that's the richness and the depth of this place. It's poignant.
He goes into almost a trance at this point, and when he wakes up and comes out of it, he's alone. And he knows that it's time for him to leave, and he doesn't think he's going to come back. And so the journey out of Fairyland is, again, wonderful and joyous because he has seen the queen. He has had this experience, but he also has bereavement because he knows that he's not coming back. And it doesn't explain really exactly how he knows that, but it's certain. I mean, kind of like in a dream. Sometimes you just know things. And the walk back, he's really lost in his own thoughts. He can hear somebody walking behind him. And then I love this because it says he hears a voice. Are you going my way, Starbrow? We are near the borders of Faery. He is almost back home. Only the people of Faery call him Starbrow. And so this means that this traveler on the road that comes up to him and speaks with him is somehow linked with Faery, but he seems to just be a guy who's walking along the road and turns out going back to Wootton Major.
But Smith says, something has come back to my mind. Before I began my homeward journey, a great lady gave me a message, but we shall soon be passing from Faery, and I do not think that I shall ever return. Will you? And the traveler says, yes, I shall. You may give the message to me. And he says, but the message was to the king. Do you know where to find him? I do. What was the message? The lady only asked me to say to him, the time has come. Let him choose. The traveler says, I understand. Trouble yourself no further.
The message somehow has been delivered, and this traveler continues to journey with Smith, and he thinks he should recognize him. He looks familiar in some way. And before long, he recognized him as Prentice. This is Alf. This is the cook's apprentice who is now the master cook, who has now made one great cake in his own right, and somehow is traveling out of Faery back to Wootton Major. And Smith is delighted to talk to him, but a little puzzled. Turns out he had been trying to talk with Alf throughout the years. Alf has always been kind to him, but somehow always sort of sidestep having a conversation. But now it is Alf who says, I should like to speak to you, Smith's son, before we go back to your country.
It also says that Alf must be an old man by now. You can do the math with the cakes. But he still looks very young. And here he wants to talk to Smith.
The star on Smith's forehead is glowing brightly. It says it's even down into the light coming from his eyes. It is glowing so strongly. And it says at this point that Alf reaches out and touches the star. And Smith can see the light decrease. And he says he was surprised and he drew away angrily, right? What right does this guy have to touch my star? But then he speaks. Do you not think, Master Smith, said Alf, that it is time for you to give this thing up? Master Smith does not think it is time to give this thing up. He says, what is that to you? He doesn't want to give it up. He says, this was given to me. Can't I keep it, at least for a remembrance? And Alf responds and says, some gifts are given like that. Others are just lent. This was lent to you. And have you never thought that somebody else might need it? Smith hadn't thought that before, but he does start to think that way now.
And he's so sweet. He says he's troubled, for he was a generous man, and he remembers with gratitude all that the star had brought to him. It is not every person who would think back with gratitude as he's about to relinquish something that's been so important to him, so defining in his life. But he thinks back with gratitude of all that has been given to him. And he asks, what should I do? Should I give it to one of the great in Faery? Should I give it to the king? And here he has this small hope. I mean, he's only human.
Right.
That he gets to go back into Faery to deliver this star.
I have to go find the king, clearly.
Alf says, you could give it to me, but you might find that too hard. Will you come with me to my storeroom and put it back in the box where your grandfather laid it? And Smith says, I didn't know that. This was a family heirloom, evidently. And Alf says, no one knew but me. I was the only one with him.
That first Master Smith, the one that went on vacation twice, the second time never to come back, this was his grandfather. This was his mother's father. And Alf says, I don't know how much you knew about him, whether your mom said anything, but Alf knew him well. And he was a great man and a great traveler. And it was his desire, his longing for this star to be given to his only grandson, Smith. And he says he left it in that box because he thought Alf could make it happen. And Alf did make it happen. And so this gift from his grandfather is to him. This then leads to the fact that it's time to make another great cake. There's already been one in between the time the star was given. This is the second one. Alf says that he's going to make it, as far as he knows, the only master cook to ever make two great cakes. Although really he's made three, because he also made the one that Noakes gets credit for.
2.5?
Yeah. So, but this, the Smith can do. And this delights the Smith. The idea that he can put it back in the box and it can go back in the cake and this gift can pass on to someone else.
He asks Alf, do you know who will find it? And Alf asks, what's that to you? He says, I should like to know, if you do, Master Cook. It might make it easier for me to part with a thing so dear to me, for my daughter's child is too young. And Alf, he says, it might and it might not, but they go together to find the box. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, as they're walking, it's very specifically sunset. I said the tail end of this book entirely feels like a goodbye to me, a passing on of things that are beautiful and they've been wonderful. and there's gratitude with it. But this is sunset, and it describes the Great Hall. At the beginning, it said that it was kind of run down. It was a very solid building, but kind of run down. But here it's been redecorated. Alf, the master cook now, he has been busy. He's been doing some things, and he has refurbished this hall and made it this wonderful, beautiful place again. But it is sunset.
I love that with that redecoration that there was some grumbling on the council about this. People saying it was newfangled and why do it? And it says, well, more learned people realize this was actually a return to the way it was. But since Alf paid for it himself, he got his own way. And so it became this gorgeous, beautiful thing that they are approaching at sunset.
They go down a dark passage into a storeroom. They light a candle, and he takes down that black box. Same box, but now it's polished and adorned with silver scrolls. And he raised the lid. Alf raises the lid and shows it to the smith. One small compartment was empty. The others were now filled with spices, fresh and pungent, and the smith's eyes began to water. And here he touches his forehead, and the star comes away into his hand.
I love that this box of spice is now alive. It's now full. It's now rich. It was musty and decayed when Noakes opened the box, but Alf has restored it to flavor, to vitality, to the point where it makes his eyes water when he opens it. But how many layers to that can we take? Are his eyes watering because of the power of the spices? Or are his eyes watering because he's weeping at having to give up the star, even though he's doing it of his own free will?
He tells Alf, I cannot see clearly. You must put it in for me. Smith holds out his hand, and Alf takes the star and lays it in its place, and the star goes dark. He gives it up freely. I mean, anyone who's read Tolkien and Echoes of the Ring and the importance of relinquishing something so valuable, something your heart desires, and he does it freely.
Alf recognizes the greatness of this. He says, you gave me the star freely, said Alf. If you still wish to know to which child it will go, I will tell you. I love this scene because Smith does want to know. He says, I do indeed. It shall go to anyone that you appoint. Alf is giving Smith the opportunity to choose who this great gift will pass on to. What a gift. What a gift of Alf, and what a gift of the star. It is gift upon gift. It is generosity upon generosity. But it was only possible because of the generosity of Smith being willing to give this up of his own free will. But now he has a choice in front of him.
Well, and I tell you, that has to do with the becoming wiser, becoming stronger, able to do things. We learn in Tolkien's notes that the former master cook who first collected the star, his grandfather, he never met the king or queen. And yet Alf says he was a great man, no question. And he's given this star to bring back. But that wasn't his journey. He didn't have that. That was not his path, even though he was a great man. Here, Smith is given this opportunity because he acts well. Mm-hmm. It's a strength.
To he who has, more will be given. To he who has not, even what he has will be taken away.
So yeah, Smith gets to choose, and he chooses Noakes' grandson. His little great-grandson, Noakes of Townsend's Tim, is coming to the feast. The feast is coming. The star's going to go back into the cake. And Smith remembers this little boy, Noakes' great-grandson. He's still part of this story, this chronology. He's the one who gets the star.
Well, Smith is worried. He says, I don't know what you'll think of my choice because I know you have little reason to love the name of Noakes. But he explains that the grandson seems to be different. And Alf is totally on board with this, surprisingly. He says, yeah, he had a wise mother. He's different than Noakes. He's been raised differently. Turns out this little boy's mother is Smith's wife's sister. Mm-hmm. And so there is something about that brings a different way of accepting the world into this little boy. And this scene here is just so, so beautiful. Yes, my Nell's sister, Smith says, but apart from the kinship, I love little Tim, though he's not an obvious choice. Alf smiled. Neither were you, he said, but I agree. Indeed, I had already chosen Tim. Then why did you ask me to choose? The queen wished me to do so. If you had chosen differently, I should have given way. And then this, spoiler, this is the turning point in the book. The smith looked long at Alf. Then suddenly he bowed low. I understand at last, sir, he said. You have done us too much honor. I have been repaid, said Alf. Go home now in peace. Alf is the king of the fairies. The prentice who's been hanging out with mortals for years and years and years is the king of fairy. Wow.
I did not see that coming.
No, and what a great, I mean, can we just talk about this scene a moment? I mean, this really goes into that world of like choice. And does choice matter? And do I have a choice? And Smith had a very real choice here because Alf could have or would have given way if Smith had chosen somebody else because it was the wish of the queen. I mean, there's so much interrelation here. But one of the amazing things about this is I think we see that Smith, over the course of his life, has become attuned with that which is good about fairy. It has become a part of him. And now he sees others. He sees the world, at least to a limited degree, through the lens of fairy. And so what that means is his wishes are in alignment. It means that he can see the same thing in this little boy that the king of the fairy sees. And so we have this journey of Smith leading up to where his choice, what he wants, is the same as what the king of fairy wants. There's a unity there, there's a growth, and there's a beauty to that. And in some ways, I think this shows Smith passing the test, in part by giving up the star, but also to know that even without the star, his thought, his wish, his worldview is in alignment with the king.
So I was really thrown that Prentice is the king because there's mention in Smith's adventures about the queen, but the king's just been hanging out in town for decades and being subservient. He was the prentice. He was laughed down at. But I was thinking about this, and then Tolkien's essay on it really just put it all together. The king has a plan here, a goal. Have you thought about this?
I have. I mean, a little of what I thought of what I just said. Again, it seems to me, and I have not read Tolkien's essay, so I'm excited to figure out what he thought about this. But my thought on this was that there seems to be something about fairy that longs to be in unity with non-fairy, with the mortal world. And so why else would the king come? Why else would he spend this time? Why else would he work to bring these people, to bring a part of fairy into the real world? Because there must be something that the real world has to offer to the land of fairy. And there's some sort of unity or blending of the two that can lead to higher beauty, higher strength, higher goodness. And so to me, you had this basically escalation. I mean, you had cooks like Noakes who couldn't even see the king, right? Who couldn't understand the concept. They couldn't even see the star glowing on this brow of Smith. So what it took, though, was this lifetime of exposure to fairy and kind of this shaping so that a mortal could engage with and recognize the beauty that is fairy. No longer is this mortal thinking about an ice sugar fairy with a wand. He is recognizing in the person before him the actual king of fairy. And that could only happen after this journey. So that's my thought on it. What does the master say?
I mean, there's a lot, but there's things in here about how, I mean, the elves are higher in fairy than the people in this ordinary world. But so frequently when men get something that is of fairy, they mess it up. You know, it's magical, or they misuse it, right? Turn for some kind of evil. But here, the king, he calls it his missionary plan. The king is reaching out toward the ordinary world to make sure some piece of fairy is preserved. Even the queen laughs and says, hey, at least they remember me a little bit. You know, what is it to be forgotten? But to understand it rightly, what a gift here. And they do talk more about Ryder, the old master cook, where he clearly made his way into fairy. And it says that It seems clear that Ryder, the old master cook, never saw either the king or the queen, though he knew of their existence and was largely directed by their commands or requests.
Hold on a minute. That's Tolkien's words? That's him in the essay?
I believe so. It says, Smith of Wootton Major Essay.
That blows my mind, because I always assumed that Ryder, that original cook, the grandfather of Smith, was a part of this plan. That he knew that Prentice was the king and that he brought him back so that he could become the chief cook and move through that. But he never knew that this guy he brought out of Faery was the king?
The name cracks me up, too, because it's Alfred. Alf. A-L-F.
Alf just means elf. It means fairy.
It's literally his name.
It's on the nose right there.
So here's the description of this essay that's in my book. It says, this essay has been transcribed to conform as closely as possible to Tolkien's typescript, wherein he interpolated secondary information as notes within the text, writing them as the ideas occurred to him, often in mid-paragraph, sometimes mid-sentence. So this has been assembled around this story, and there's a lot in here, brother. It's so good.
Oh, I'm so excited to read this.
But that the king has this missionary plan, this decades-long way of reaching out of Faery into our ordinary world and having some kind of bridge to people who could appreciate it, could appreciate Faery, could savor something about it. Not that they are to be the same. Clearly not. Mm-hmm. They are separate, but there is this crossover.
And that brings so much meaning to that last line by Alf. I have been repaid. I mean, what could that possibly mean? I mean, he hasn't been given anything. Is that he has been recognized. He has been kneeled to. He has been seen for who he is by the mortal. And that seems to be his goal, right? Or at least part of his goal.
When you think back to the old master cook, I mean, again, short story, and these little one-lines are tucked in there, but it's so brilliant. The master cook went away sad. And in the timeline from Tolkien, he lost his wife. He was grieving. He was sad for a reason. He goes to Faery, and he comes back merry. He comes back merrier. He sings songs again. So while he's grieving, maybe he'd been to that lake of tears. I don't know. But he at least had grief, but he came back with more joy. There was joy instilled in him, even though he'd accomplished this great thing in his career. He's a master cook in a town where this is of high value, an elite position. But he'd gone away sad, and he came back merry. Not without grief, but with more joy. And here, Smith, similarly, he has grief. He is bereaved to not go back to Faery, but he also has joy.
He does, because he goes home. And his son is waiting for him. His son is a smith in his own right and has been working hard. And this interaction between the smith and his son is beautiful. They just sit. Sunset has passed. It is night now. There's a fire burning at home, but his son lights some candles. And so there is light brought to him by his family, by his son. They sit for a while, and then Smith asks, well, where's everyone else? Where's my wife? Where's my daughter? Where are they? And the son's like, well, don't you know, Dad? They're off to your grandson's birthday in Wootton Minor. So they're off into this other little town. And Smith says, oh, yeah, I know. I should have been there. I should have been there. This is fascinating to me as well. You and I have talked about how we can sometimes be drawn too much into story, how we can be selfish readers. Put a book in front of me and I can ignore my family because I'm engaged in the story, whether it's Fairyland or elsewhere, to the detriment of my family and my attention to them. In many ways, this is what Smith has done. I mean, his family loves him. They don't begrudge him it, but he's been gone a lot. He hasn't been there to do the work that his son has had to pick up at the forge. He's not there for the birthday of his grandchild. These are real things that he has given up in his pursuit of Faery. Now he can make amends for some of that. And so we see, again, some of the more subtle dangers of Faery here, what it can take you from out of your real life.
So this part very specifically was chosen by Tolkien, that the father would come to the son alone, that this would be this passing on father to son. And he had to come up with a reason why the family was out of the house. But it does say that there's still work to be done. Smith is not so old that he can't work. And you're absolutely right, where the star was starting to become a burden, even if he wasn't aware of it. You're starting to sacrifice things that ought not to be missed. And so here he comes back and he's present to his son. And it is this gift and a passing on to his son where he still has abilities from the time he had with the star. He can still make wonderful things. And here he can now pass along that. He can relinquish those skills to his son and pass those down as well.
And his son makes very clear here, there's a line to the effect of, there's a lot that you can still teach me, Dad. But he's saying, not just the smith work. I need to learn from you. There are other things. I need you here to teach me. And so the son is very understanding here, and he grieves with his father that he has lost the star and that he won't be going back to Faery. But he rejoices in the time that they now have and what they can do together. And his dad makes him take the next day off as a holiday because he's going to be there to help him work the smith with the new work orders. And they're all going to go down. And he says, maybe they'll forgive me because he has brought one more present out of fairyland. And it is beautiful. This is a little rattle. It looks like flowers intricately wrought, but each flower is a bell. And when they ring the rattle, the lights go bright. And there is a scent that comes out of the rattle of these flowers. It is a beautiful and magical piece. And his son is nervous to touch it and hold it. But Smith says, no, this was made for a baby. They can do it no harm, and it won't do them any harm. Rattle it. Enjoy it. This is a gift of Faery. And this is a thing he brings out for his grandchild.
At the end here, it ends with old Noakes. It's a strange thing. He had scoffed at his apprentice but had never been able to put out of his mind the disappearance of the star in the cake. It had happened decades ago, and old Noakes is still thinking about the star. Where did it go?
Old Noakes has not done well over the course of his life. As you recall, he thought that sweets and fairies were two things that children liked, but he thought they grew out of fairies. He certainly did. He never grew out of sweets. And so he is a corpulent individual. He is very, very fat at this point. He retired younger than he should have because that's just the kind of guy he was. And all he does now is sit and eat and talk about this cake. The cake that he now believes he made entirely himself, although we know that Alf did most of it. But he wonders about that trinket, that star. Where did it go? And so he's sitting there in all his chubbiness when Alf comes in, because Alf is always polite to him and does stop by. The Noakes insists on still being called master, and Alf does so, very gracious. But this is going to be a very different meeting between Noakes and Alf than the last ones we've seen.
Noakes calls kids out by name. Like, they must have really gobbled it down to miss a pointy star. There's no way it could have melted. And he has theories about who it was. And Alf defends each child by name. He remembers them after all this time. And he's like, no, not Lily, not Miller's Molly. And he's like, well, who got it then? I give up. Who was it? You seem to have been watching very closely. If you're not making it all up. Noakes is very rude.
Very rude. And Alf tells him it was Smith. It was Smith's son. He did it. And Noakes doesn't believe this at all. He talks to him about a boy who chewed twice before swallowing. There's no way he swallowed this one. He hears he's become quite a bit of a songster. Not sure how he feels about that. And so it's just deaf ears. Alf tells him, but it falls on deaf ears, and he doesn't believe it at all. But Alf goes to reassure him. He says, well, okay, if you won't believe me, you won't believe me, but maybe you'll feel better knowing that it's back in the box. And he pulls out the box that he has hidden in his robes, and this is that same box that Noakes pulled off the shelf so long ago. And he opens it, and there's the star sitting in that little cupboard. Noakes has a very unusual response to this, though.
He laughs till he shook like a jelly. I see. 24 children and 24 lucky bits, and the star was one extra. He thinks Prentice tricked him. You stole it.
He calls him nimble, like a thief, that you stole this. And Noakes is happy with this because now that solves the problem. this is where the star went. It was never in there in the first place. I had a thieving apprentice. Well, he's clever. He warns him about his own apprentice, saying, you might be tricked by yours. And then he decides he's going to take a nap. And Noakes goes to sleep on him right there.
Prentice shuts the box. It says, such a snap, the cook opened his eyes again. Goodbye, master. He says, Noakes, your knowledge is so great that I have only twice ventured to tell you anything. I told you that the star came from Faery, and I have told you that it went to the smith. You laughed at me. Now at parting, I will tell you one more thing. Don't laugh again. You are a vain old fraud, fat, idle, and sly. I did most of your work. Without thanks, you learned all that you could from me, except respect for Faery and a little courtesy.
Noakes does not handle this well.
How dare you?
Yeah, courtesy. Look at the way you're talking to your elders and your betters. But Alf, now is the time for him to come up. Now, Noakes' whole thing here is pretty great, where he says, if you've got one of your fairy friends hidden in the kitchen, send him to me and I'll have a look at him. If he waves his little wand and makes me thin again, I'll think better of him. And he laughed. And this is where Alf responds. Would you spare a few moments for the king of Faery? And then Alf shows himself for who he is. He becomes bigger, grander, mightier. Noakes sees him as he is. And he tells him, Alf says, old man, he said, you are at least not my elder. As to my better, you have often sneered at me behind my back. Do you challenge me now openly? He stepped forward and Noakes shrank from him trembling. He is showing up in all his force, and Noakes is just backing away from this. And ultimately he says, no, sir, he croaked, don't do me a harm. I'm only a poor old man. And I think the utilization of the word poor in here is important because I read poor as in pathetic. He's poor in everything. No imagination, no love, no real talent, no real... he's just nothing. He is poor in every way that is important. Whereas we've seen Smith rich in so many ways that are important. The king agrees to this. It says, the king's face softened. Alas, yes, you speak the truth. Do not be afraid, be at ease. But will you not expect the king of Faery to do something for you before he leaves you? I grant you your wish. Farewell. Now go to sleep. Wait a minute. What wish? What wish did the king just grant? And this is fantastic.
When the old cook woke again, the sun was going down. He rubbed his eyes, shivers a little, and has, terrible dream. It must have been that pork at dinner. It's like on a Christmas Carol. Could be a crumb of cheese. Right. But from that day, he became so afraid of having more bad dreams of that sort that he hardly dared eat anything. He gets so skinny. That was his wish. He wished to be thin. The kids call him Ragabones.
And this ends up being very good for him because, again, he retired early and he was just sitting there eating himself to death in his home. But as he starts to lose weight, he can get up. He can move around. He can do things. And it says he actually lived to 100 years old, which would not have happened without this gift. And it says it's really the only thing he accomplished in life was getting to 100 years old. It's the only thing he was notable for. But it's again, though, Noakes cannot see. He cannot recognize the gift of Faery into his life. And as he's telling this story and he's terrified about it, he convinces himself, one, that it was a dream, but two, that it's absurd that this was magic. I mean, the guy didn't have a wand. How could it be magic without a wand? And he says, and it's obvious. You stop eating, you get thin. It's just natural. There's no magic here. And so again, he's still blind. He has literally confronted the king of Faery in his glory, in his majesty, and rejects it and can't see it. And what a
contrast.
What a contrast this is between the way Smith interacted with the king of Faery when he was just dressed as an apprentice or a master cook. I mean, so Smith could see it without the trappings of grandeur. Noakes, who sees him as the king, it's just a dream. Without even a wand.
But he got skinny, lived to be 100. So.
And we see the gift of Faery again. Again, this is all about gift. This is somebody who can't appreciate Faery, yet he is blessed by it. and his life is better and longer because of it.
We end with the time for the 24th feast came round. We said Alf got to make two and a half great cakes. And here's the second one that he gets to do officially. Smith was there to sing songs and his wife to help with the children. And Smith is looking at these kids and they're amazing. They're exemplary. They can sing and dance more beautifully than he's ever seen before. And he wonders what else Alf might have been doing over the past 24 years.
So I have to confess, that line, I think what he's referring to is that Alf was again spreading the joy and love of Faery, this greater thing around. But the first time I read it, it made me think, are these all like ill-begotten children of Alf?
He's pulling a Zeus.
What was he doing all these years? I don't think that's the way it should be read, but it did occur to me when I read the line.
It did not occur to me, so... The queen is offended. Anyway, Smith is mostly watching Tim because he knows that here he's going to get the star. Probably won't know it right away. Smith didn't know it right away, but it's going to happen. And Tim is sweet. He says, "Dear Mr. Cook, only cut me a small slice, please. I've eaten so much already. I feel rather full." And Alf says, "All right, Tim, I'll cut you a special slice. I think you'll find it go down easily."
And he enjoys it. Tim does eat it, so he's not a glutton. He got a small piece, but he enjoys the piece he eat. He is a little disappointed because there's no trinket in it that he can find, but it says that before long, his eyes brightened, and he starts to dance. And in the same way that Smith, his song, took on power and made people happy, little Tim all of a sudden has the fairy in his movements, and he dances.
It says, before the feast was over, the master cook, Alf, took leave of the children and of all the others that were present. He says goodbye, and he's leaving. He's passing it on to his apprentice to become the master cook. It says his apprentice is a very good cook, and as you know, he comes from your own village, no longer an outsider. I shall go back home. I do not think you will miss me. And the children are sweet and say goodbye, but only little Tim took his hand, Alf's hand, and said quietly, "I'm sorry."
The last line in the story, though, goes to Noakes, who is happy that the apprentice is left because he was nimble.
He's gone at last, and I'm glad for one. I never liked him. He was artful, too nimble, you might say.
Yeah. What a great story. I love it more and more every time I read it. I was surprised by it the first time, and every time now I get something else out of it. And I really do think it is the answer of what is Faery? Well, read this book.
Something that stuck out to me is that star, the whole time, belongs to the king. And he directs who it goes to and has some control in his way of what comes of it, but not entirely. There's choice in it too. There's choice and there's work, and it's a gift freely given. And man, if you can be grateful for it, how much more does it bless you?
Yeah. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed reading through this again. I've enjoyed talking about it with you, and I am so excited that I have actual writings of Tolkien on this that I get to look forward to reading and learning more. I think we should end this by going back to something else that Tolkien wrote. And this is 20 plus years before this was published. And this is the opening to his great essay on fairy stories. This is one we're going to need to do too because it's profound. But I think this first paragraph, in one paragraph, kind of summarizes the experience of Faery, and I think it's a good way to end. So here we go. I propose to speak about fairy stories, though I am aware that this is a rash adventure. Faery is a perilous land, and in it are pitfalls for the unwary and dungeons for the overbold. And overbold I may be accounted, for though I have been a lover of fairy stories since I learned to read, and have at times thought about them, I have not studied them professionally. I have been hardly more than a wandering explorer or trespasser in the land, full of wonder, but not of information. And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.